Hi, this is Mark Montgomery. I'm founder and CEO of KYield. We recently announced the new generative AI function in our KOS, and we produced this paper to, it's an executive briefing to describe what we were doing and why, and delve into it a little bit. I thought it would be interesting and perhaps of value to also do a little video clip and talk and walk through the paper a little bit and share it with a broader audience. So we all know what happened. We have a sudden paradigm shift where the consumer chatbots were released, I think prematurely, before they were rigorously tested. But it showed the public, the general public, the power of advanced AI systems, and in an interactive, simple to use way that they could see how it could be used for their purposes. In most cases, writing text, letters and reports and that sort of thing, but also a significant number of people using it for helping to write code, and also in other bots doing videos and image custom image development. So this created new types of opportunities and risks that have never been CEOs have never been faced with before. Actually, our society and governments and regulators have never been confronted with this before either. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I just want to introduce, for those who are not familiar with us, we have 26 years of R&D in artificial intelligence, knowledge systems, and knowledge engineering and data physics primarily. Also other disciplines, but that's the primary focus. And that ended up manifested in the KOS, which is the first, to my awareness, only enterprise-wide AI operating system with multiple functions included. And now we'll talk about that a little bit later, but now we're offering generative AI as one of those functions in the KOS. And importantly, one of the reasons we did it is that early indications suggest productivity improvements in the range of 15 to 40% across the enterprise. So that would provide additional enhanced productivity that we already had some in the KOS, and with our data structure and our governance designed in from the beginning, enterprises need it because they shouldn't be using really the consumer chatbots at all due to security risks. So this is our table of contents here. Introduction. The average citizen wouldn't recognize it, but the AI systems have consisted of a lot more than LLMs. Large language models are consumer chatbots for a long, long time. In fact, there's about 70 years of research that brought us to this point. And this is only one type of model, the LLMs. And moreover, the use of the LLMs, large language models at extreme scale and scraping the web, that's where the problems come in, right? The lack of quality in the data and the lack of verification and accuracy that is causing the risks that are confronting organizations and individuals now. Again, we'll talk about that. So we've had a variety of different, even neural network models over the years. And then in NLP, natural language processing, I've been following it for decades, and it progressed pretty nicely. We certainly had voice activated bots a long time ago. And at first they were primitive, and then they became more successful, more widely adopted. But this is the first time we've been able to produce, generate content full content reproduction with bots. And the reason for that is because of a couple of things. One is the Transformers in 2017, and also just the scale and the compute power that's been applied to this. So when we first, in terms of the enterprise, how to use it, when we first approached our first large organizations that we targeted, was more than a decade ago. It was Department of Defense, major oil companies, leading banks, pharma companies, and others. They had, none of them had ever conceived of or considered using AI to enhance the workflow across the enterprise. All of them had, of course, heard of artificial intelligence. They had a lot of science and engineering talent on board, but they were using it primarily for very narrow AI to focus on producing more oil or to assist in drug development. But none of them had ever considered using AI-enhanced systems like our KOS, enterprise-wide operating system. So the EAI OS, the KOS, was very futuristic a decade ago. So now, fast forward to today, 7 months late in, LLM chatbots have been unleashed. We've got hundreds of millions of people have used them, including CEOs of major corporations and politicians and everybody else. We have governments that are already well along the line of providing, passing regulation in the EU, and the US is talking about it. But the advances are while they're pretty fantastic to the average citizen, we need governance, really strong governance. So this is not just regulatory, we need executable governance. And that's been an area that we've been focused on all along. So in our KOS, we developed a strong governance system in the core data management system from the beginning. So one of the several plausible scenarios that we developed internally was for on the consumer chatbots. Just to give you an example of the risk, was a plausible scenario for bioterrorism, to develop a virus as infectious as COVID and more deadly than smallpox. So smallpox is about 25 to 30 times more deadly than COVID was. So if you do the math, and one that's even more deadly, that risks actually about half the world's population. And this is a plausible risk, right? This is not, this is something that we delved into in pretty good detail. We studied major disasters for decades. It's a credible risk. So you don't want to, it's a good idea not to, there's IP risks, there's other risks we'll talk about. But so that's why it was done prematurely. However, the LLMs for generative AI in the enterprise can really provide a lot of value. And that's primarily what we're going to talk about here today. So we believe the optimal solution is for generative AI is to adopt the KOS. So it has already pre-optimized for AI systems. There's several other functions. So the generative AI is just another function in the system. It already has precision data management in the system. We've thought about all these things for a long, long time, and rigorous R&D over decades, tested various stages, and now it's the KOS is ready to scale. It's technically viable. So, and it's guided by our AI principles. So that's really important. We're finally hearing, people talk about principles. These are executable management principles in our system. And those 15 AI principles are available on our website. You can download them or read them. We also have a 3 mini series of video discussions between myself and Rob Nielsen, who's on our board. So every customer enterprise KOS receives a digital assistant, Dana, and that's the way they access and use the system. And it tailors precision data to every individual based on their profile and the parameters that they set, in an easy to use natural language system. So it's both the admin and the end user, very simple to use natural language. So in addition to the generative AI function, KOS and Dana work together to provide personalized learning, multiple types of security, prevention of several types of crises, which is very important. We'll get into a little bit. Work-related networking, that's also quite valuable. Messaging, prescient search, and other types of enhanced productivity. And it's all in one highly efficient, easy to use, cohesive system. So it gets back to my comment before. To my awareness, it was the first and only enterprise-wide artificial intelligence operating system for the enterprise. So, my position on this is generative AI is necessary for the productivity, but it's insufficient. You can't just, you really shouldn't. I mean, a lot of employees are going to, but you really shouldn't be using generative AI or the chatbots to produce work for organizations. And there's reasons for it. The risks, these are only a few of the risks and the opportunities for organizations. But on the risk side, IP would probably, you've seen that several of the largest organizations in the world have banned the consumer chatbots. And one of the reasons is IP. So when you pay something in, even though there's an option now in one of the bots to be able to turn off storing that information, it's still stored for a month. Most people don't use that option, right? I suspect most aren't even aware of it. So they are potentially, and I think probably, putting confidential information or information that the chatbot itself could piece together automatically with other bits of information on that organization that would be stored in the data store. And then when they run the future LLMs, it would show up across the entire network, the chatbot. So it would return things that could reveal some of the deep secrets, trade secrets, and confidential information on the organization. And so it's not a enterprise-ready system. It doesn't have the safety in it for that use. So IP is a really serious risk. Inaccuracy. I just saw yesterday an article on an attorney who told the judge that he wasn't aware that these chatbots weren't or could be inaccurate. So apparently this attorney used something that the chatbot, it produced it in court, and was, the judge caught him on it, and he claimed that he wasn't aware that it could be inaccurate. The truth is that they are wildly inaccurate. They sometimes surprise us with their accuracy, but there's nothing in the system that can provide accuracy, right, and verify it. So commoditization is one that is less well understood, more understood in the business analysts and the senior business managers. But the chatbots were instantly commoditized, so they were made available to the entire world. And so it instantly, everything that's available to one person is available to everybody else. And so it's really, for the most radical example in history, instant commoditization of very advanced technology. So it has good points and bad points. One is that it's freely available, or a small monthly for the premium model. The bad news is there's no competitive advantage at all for an organization or even for the worker, other than perhaps the individual's own ability to become better at prompting, right? And so that's why there's a whole new job opening up of so-called prompt engineers. But we'll get into that commodity. That's another reason why you need to use your own data in your own enterprise system for generative AI is for competitive advantage. Otherwise, you eventually will lose sovereignty to big tech companies that own these bots, basically. So that's what it boils down to. So security, very serious, multiple types of security problems. We already know that hackers, increase in hacking, that has increased dramatically. Phishing, behavioral methods, and workarounds for physical security is possible with these things that are far, I don't think most people even realize the security risk that these things present. I mean, it really is. It's just sort of amazing when you think through what all the security potential risks are. And then, as I mentioned, the catastrophic risks like bioterrorism weapons. Now, I'm intentionally not providing much detail on that. We don't want to make it any quicker for bad actors to be able to do catastrophic events. But again, it's a plausible risk. And if we can figure it out, so can others. And then on the opportunity side, I listed just 4 of each. Productivity is the most obvious one. Early studies for generative AI have ranged between 14 and 37%. So I provide links in this paper so that you, those who are interested in the paper, you can email me if you don't already have a copy. We're not yet making it available to the public, but other than in this method here, we might. Enterprise-wide accelerant. So generative AI can be applied to, especially enterprise tailored, as you'll see, to just about everything that you do in an organization. That's because the language layer that we use as humans is how we execute just about everything that we do. And generative AI, of course, is a large language model. And so by tapping the language and being able to execute language, as we see, you can develop code, multiple types of different languages. It can execute instructions to do just about anything. And that's also why you need to have very strong governance on the safety side, and also to achieve mission and goals. So a competitive advantage within the KOS, the generative AI function can provide strong additional competitive advantage, whereas and based on the strengths of the existing strengths, the employees, and develop those and help within the KOS to rapidly increase that competitive advantage, because the system learns from day one when it's installed. Whereas if you attempted to even just do generative AI alone, which some companies are doing now, it's not going to provide much of a competitive advantage. And then you also have the other risks involved. So in new opportunities, there's just one example with our KOS and our Dana, which is the digital assistant for every employee in the organization. Our enterprise customers have the option to extend Dana to their partners, and it also has the learning networks, but that includes end consumers, right? So if you're a large company with that is direct to consumer, a consumer company, you have the ability to actually provide Dana direct to end consumers and expand your business. Let's say, for example, you're a pharmacy company and you want to do more in digital health. Well, this would be the perfect way to do it, right? But it doesn't end there. It's all types of scenarios. Over here on the right in the text, we talk about some of the issues with in the types of their GANs and GPTs, the modeling. But one of the models that's kind of interesting is Bloomberg GPT that we've talked about, and they are developing the first generative AI system in the enterprise for their industry and finance. And I thought that was a pretty interesting, of course they didn't use us, but I found that pretty interesting. Now that's limited to just that function, however, and it doesn't provide the governance for the whole enterprise or any of the other functions, which actually the highest ROI, we need to remember, I'm going to repeat this, is prevention. And so prevention provides the highest ROI possible in enterprise. It's not generative AI. And in fact, it's even a medium-sized prevention in an incumbent organization provides many times, 100, even 500 times the ROI that you're going to get from generative AI. So keep in mind that there's other functions in AI systems that are very important. So with the KOS, we take an end-to-end systems approach, and it's continuously adaptive to the changing needs of the organizations. So it is much, much more than just generative AI. But when you add generative AI to the mix, that function to it, it gives you all the security and all the other things that you need, the governance and prevention capabilities and continuous learning, networking, security, et cetera. And also have the generative AI function trained on your own high quality data that we're going to talk about here in a minute. So rules-based governance in our system. So we combine what's called neurosymbolic AI, and there is, I recently did I have a newsletter on LinkedIn Enterprise called EAI, and I've previously written columns for magazines on applied AI and featured articles, written hundreds of articles. But I recently did a neurosymbolic on the power of neurosymbolic AI, and that's the technology that we use. So we combine neural networks basically with in symbolic reasoning with neural networks, but the neural networks are compartmentalized. So we don't mix them. We're very careful about how we do it. And one of the reasons is, of course, is that we're nations and businesses, we're all living in, governed by the rule of law, without which things would be chaos and fall apart. And we have bylaws in corporations that they need to follow, organizational policies, corporate policies, and neural networks can't yet be governed directly by rules in an accurate manner, not with algorithms alone. There's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of claims, but actually, the only rough representation has been achieved in the lab. So that's one of the reasons why, as some of the leading AI scientists have said recently, that large language models are very difficult to govern. Well, I would say at this point in the technology, it's impossible. It's physically impossible to provide rules-based governance. The so-called guardrails you can easily work around them. And so that's why we compartmentalize within the KOS the LLMs from the other functions. In fact, we have other algorithms in our system that we've had in the KOS that we use that are also very valuable for things like discovery and R&D, but are not safe. And you don't want your employees using them except for those very defined functions that are narrow, right? They're not broad things like accelerating R&D for drug development or that sort of thing. So the KOS employs a precision data management system that's at the core, that's the patented core. It provides strong governance and high performance. And we have what's called a CKO engine that's been in the design for 20 years, almost from inception. And that is the governance system, right? And so the approved senior people in the organization uses a CKO engine for everything. And over on the right of my screen, we have here the settings in the CKO engine. This is just a few of the settings that we do. You can do roles and permissions, access to all the other modules in the system, data file types, multiple types of security, and a menu of algorithms. So it provides what's necessary for an AI system in the CKO engine. It also has the ability to provide like curriculum, right? By role and to use it in the learning, in the continuous learning operation of the KOS. So that's the rules-based governance, and we deliver that through the KOS with the CKO engine, and the individuals use it through their data digital assistant, and that's digital assistant with neuroanatomical analytics. So that's the name of data. Metamorphic transformation, GIGO to KICO, let's call it. So I came up with this years ago. So it's garbage in, garbage out versus quality in, quality out. So obviously our goal to achieve yield management knowledge in the enterprise, we have to have quality in, quality out. So in order to do that, you need a whole bunch of things, the components that work together. And that's, hence the 26 years of R&D. And so just a few things that you have is personalized learning, very detailed metadata, and highly structured data. Every file in the organization is rated. There is what we call in our core patented system is a data tuner that easily allows each individual to increase the quality of data and decrease the volume, so quantity and quality. And so these are just a few of the functions in the KOS. That's through data. So it requires high quality data requires provenance. So you need to be able to verify from the source, preferably. You need to be able to verify the profiles of the individuals, have an accurate rating system, strong security, and none of this exists in consumer chatbots. And it can exist from data that's scraped from the web, because the web doesn't require it, never did. It was designed to share data. It wasn't designed for security. So that's how we end up with such dramatic inaccuracy and much more enhanced hallucinations than you would get even in a very large enterprise, and with high quality data. So basically, with high quality data and a strong governance system, most of your risk is mitigated or completely avoided and prevented. There's most of this things that you can do in the consumer chatbot in terms of risk is physically impossible inside a high quality system. So as the KOS becomes rapidly populated with data during the normal course of work, employees can prompt the generative AI function to produce high quality multimedia knowledge work based on a combination of their own relevant data, licensed third-party data that could be, for example, a news network, journals, anything that the corporation has access to. We also can provide that licensing and data, and to be able to train on high-quality data, right? And then there's also the option where we have in our system is synthetic data that helps with the generative AI function. Again, that needs to be managed carefully. It's compartmentalized, but that is how you generate. You can create the volume on synthetic data that you need to be able to do some really neat generative AI functions, and increase the productivity. And so in the knowledge network is also something that we have in the data, and that the individuals are approved by this through the CKO engine and other companies, but your partners and everybody that's approved, the profiles are validated, a very high security system. This is unlike LinkedIn or any of the other consumer networks. This is a learning network. It's a work-related network with high security. So please don't confuse it with any of the consumer issues. And also on the metamorphic transformation of the digital workplace, that I've done that talk for universities, corporations, associations. I did it one a few years ago for in 2020 for IEEE Rising Stars conference. And the original one that I did was in New Mexico at the leading IT conference. And we recorded that. That's available on our website if you want to see that. That's about 40 minutes long. And that goes through our whole R&D and really tells you a lot about not only the KOS, but our briefly on our next generation advanced technology for the synthetic genius machine. And so here we talk about the learning networks. We do provide in the data graphs. So we have graph databases and to be able to click on their networks and be able to rapidly and also search their networks through text and be able to find profiles. We also have pre-organized and pre-developed several different types. That's customizable depending on the organization. But for example, it could be, it could show people that work in the supply chain logistics. It could show that, for example, in your network and logistics and supply chain. And also integrates with our prevention capabilities and our warning system. So if there's a problem that comes up in the network in a and a certain part of the, could be on a map behind the network, or in a company or organization, that would show up on the on the network, and along with the prevention capabilities, and it would show up on the appropriate person profile on their page, and prompt them for action. So risk management is a huge part of our system. I don't want to sound arrogant, but we're probably the best in the world at preventing crises in digital networks, and that's simply because of decades of research. We've had the opportunity to delve deeply into many of the largest crises and develop systems for it. And so we've been a pioneer in prevention for a long time. And so the GWIN, where this comes from, I conceived KYield, the theorem, in the 90s when I was operating a lab, a knowledge systems lab. And I was actually operating a network called GWIN that was available on the web, and it had a very high quality, attracted a very high quality membership. It was cutting edge at the time. We even had a digital assistant called Lookout, and we were doing things like experimenting with cross-disciplinary research. So we had hundreds of professors, if not more. We had Nobel laureates, editors from most of the leading business and economic media, entire boards of Fortune 500, leading public and private investors, venture capitalists, all kinds of people. There were also some intel analysts and government analysts, military people. It was just a very cutting edge network. And so for 3 years, we really explored a lot of things. And it was during that time, actually, my brother was diagnosed with ALS, and it's a fatal disease. And I was in a position to see that by applying algorithms to these learning networks, we could potentially really accelerate R&D. And that was my initial motivation for the KYield, yield management of knowledge. But we knew it was going to take a long time, a lot longer than it would, be required to be able to help him. But in fact, took a lot longer than we even expected. But a real world test of state-of-the-art knowledge networks and AI systems have demonstrated that a very specific design is needed, with end-to-end data management, strong governance, multiple types of security, trustworthy policies, based on ethical principles. If you want people to engage, to share their knowledge, you've got to do certain things, especially the smarter they are, the more that is true. And you need to entice them for serious engagement in these learning networks, because keep in mind, these learning networks, the generative AI, aside from the consumer bots, but when you get into the enterprise, and I suspect after we have copyright rulings, whether it's SCOTUS or through the legislature, the Supreme Court, it's going to require permission to be able to use data, right? Otherwise, copyright would no longer be of value, and that's a huge part of our economy. So it's a knowledge economy, and so assuming that copyright is going to be upheld, people are going to need to be compensated. You're going to need permission. And so the higher quality of people, that's why we have rating systems. And so you need a very carefully designed with decades of know-how and trade secrets involved. So I developed this new process diagram and updated a little bit for generative AI. And this is a KOS process, and it just shows the red lines are for security and related security. There's some behavioral analytics. There's identity verification, file types and permissions, file access permissions, and then also the ethics and safety and performance of the algorithms. And then we have network security. So, for example, enterprise customers can extend the KOS. That's a subservient KOS and CKO engine that goes out to, say, a partner in the supply chain, or it could be a wholly owned subsidiary or something like that. But the original KOS, let's say it's a market leader and or a franchise company or something like that, and you have these other KOS engines, and you need very strong network and permission systems, and that's all included in our KOS. So a 40 billion ROI. This is on minds of many, and it's mostly good news. When we first were asked to provide an estimate of what it would cost to develop a prototype of the KOS, it was for the U.S. Army. I believe it was in 2012. And the rough estimate that we provided was $100 million. And that was just for a very limited prototype run on supercomputers, right? Not laptops, not phones, which is what we need to do for most of our use cases. And so that was too high, and no surprise they didn't move forward with it. But since that time, of course, the price has just plummeted. Performance has expanded. Both the cost has come down exponentially, and the performance is increased exponentially. So now, actually, the KOS is comparable to other enterprise software. Take your pick. We have an enterprise license. We have a per person license for every individual in the system. And to encourage that, our research is very, very compelling that you need to include all your employees. Part of it is security, part of it is prevention, part of it is learning. There's several reasons why, but you need to include all your employees in the system, and preferably your contractors and partners. And so what we've done is we've incentivized in our pricing that enterprises do that. So the customer does that to include them. So what we've done is kept the per person price, and as you include more people, the price comes down. But that's we definitely want to incentivize including in the every individual in the organization. Now, we also have a data that includes a certain amount of data usage. Now, what has changed with generative AI is that it's much more intensive, computing intensive. So the costs go up, no matter how you do it. If you're doing your own generative AI, using the cloud or on your own data center, or using your own data, no matter how you're doing it safely, the costs are going to go up because the computing needs are much higher, right? And your data is, so we include a certain amount of data. It's a pretty reasonable, it's pretty generous. Then, but beyond that, there's a surcharge, and that you'll find is becoming sort of normal with the enterprise, the cloud usage, and that sort of thing. It's sort of necessary because some organizations are going to use a lot more than others, and obviously you can't be subsidizing customers for any length of time. A lot of companies tried, but that's catching up to them now. So we had one example, just as one example, with one very large company that we spent a lot of time with. I estimated that we could save them with our KOS about over $200 million a year on operational costs alone. So that gives you an idea of what an internal, very large company, in their case, they decided they want to do it all in-house. They were going to use any vendor. And for them to do it, to develop and reproduce almost 3 decades of R&D and develop their own system, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And I don't think they're ending up with a product that's nearly as good. I'm a little biased, but actually I think that's true. It's very difficult in a large bureaucratic organization to develop a product across there's just too many internal conflicts. And then just the governance system alone is not something that you should even try to do internally. Governance should be produced by an independent third party that's objective, not inside an organization where there's always going to be conflicts. And so in any event, I think that number is good for a very large company, and it doesn't include any of the other functions. That's not like captured preventions that can save a lot more than that. In fact, for this particular company has had multiple very large preventable crises over the years, like most very large organizations do. And several of them were in the multi-billion-dollar range, but they're physically not possible to prevent from a computer standpoint, computer network standpoint, unless you have a very, very specific design installed and used on a daily basis. And so very important in the ROI. Now, the good news is the ROI appears to be very good, right? It's excellent. There's no reason not to do this, not just generative AI, but enhanced KOS across, enhanced AI across the entire organization, across the entire enterprise. That it's technically viable. We have a nearly built prototype for the whole system that's scalable. There have been no surprises. Everything can be done now and very cost effective. So the top 5 functions for expected ROI in the KOS: prevention is the highest ROI possible. Nothing else comes close, including generative AI. A mid-size capture prevention can pay for the entire lifetime cost of the system. So we'll even, and we've done this, negotiate bonuses where if they want to keep the cost down, the customer wants to keep the cost down, we can do things like provide a bonus structure. We'll lower our price cost and increase and take a bonus of the actual, a small percentage of the actual capture prevention, using third parties to verify it and estimate it. We can also provide insurance. It needs to be tested, but we've had discussions with major insurers, so we can provide insurance for our KOS. It needs to be and that's conditional, of course, on final approval and testing, but I'm quite confident we can. We've had discussions with multiple leading insurers. Personalized learning manifest, that's number 2. That manifests in a lot of different ways, just like any other learning. Increase innovation, lower costs, and new opportunities. I think what most people probably are not aware of, because we just haven't experienced it yet, and these chatbots are just sort of a hint of what's coming. But with AI augmentation, personalized learning ramps up very, very rapidly. So I don't think most people are quite ready for what is about to occur in the future. But we'll get there. We'll adapt, right? So number 3, enhanced productivity across the enterprise, the ability to achieve much more with the same people. Now, we have multiple other functions in our system for enhanced productivity, not just generative AI, but now with generative AI in the system, we could do everything everybody else does, and we could do a lot more. And it's included in the KOS. Smart networking, I talked about that. It reduces risks, improves decision-making, and accelerates goal achievement. Lots of individual sort of minor functions like crises pops up and that sort of thing, and opportunities that you can discover in networks that are managed well. 5, multiple types of security to reduce fraud, insider risk, industrial espionage, and cyber breaches. So this is not surveillance, right? This is just in the normal workflow, but we have algorithms in the system that looks for certain things, and every enterprise does, or large enterprise should. It's not too different than virus software that's installed on all of our computers in that respect, but for very different reasons. So when there's a reason to have a security concern and it pops up, then it's handled just like every other security, right? Internally, confidentially, and just to make sure to see if something is there to be concerned about. And then if there is, then they're very glad you did it. So in conclusion, here we have 70 years of R&D, narrow applications in AI, powerful LLM chatbots were unleashed, leading scientists. Some of it was motivated by getting wealthy. Some of it was motivated by good intentions, what I call the tyranny of good intentions, potentially. I'm absolutely confident they were prematurely released without rigorous testing, but we're there, they exist. And so enterprises are forced to make a few decisions on how to deal with it. Again, we're confident that the KOS is the best way to do it. And few months later, $10 billion invested in ChatGPT. We know about that. And so there's benefits to it. There's severe risks, and unrestricted two-way communications that's stored in the bots potentially, that show up in everybody's potentially everybody's response and instructions. And so since most of what we do as humans involves this natural language, I talked about that, NLP is very powerful potentially. So generative AI is primarily NLP, also that you can be used for images and video, but it's a multimedia platform. And that's what the Transformers sort of accelerated the NLP to make this available, in addition to the very large scale for the consumer bots. But what matters most is quality of data, right? And so that always circles back to the garbage in, garbage out versus quality in, quality out. And that's what the KOS does. And there's, as I briefly discussed, there's a bunch of different components. That's the core patented system. It's classified as an AI system, without which it's physically impossible, right? You can't do it. There's no foreseeable way to do it. You need today to be able to do rules-based governance. You've got to have a combination of symbolic AI, and if you want the generative AI, then you're going to need the NNs, right? Not necessarily LLMs, but some sort of neural network and an NLP probably to be able to do that, right? And so how you manage those together is really what it comes down to. It needs to be compartmentalized, needs to be done very well, and to be able, accurate data is absolutely critical to reduce inaccuracies for organizational use, and reduce the hallucinations down to next to nothing, create a competitive advantage, and be safe. So the interesting survey that recently came out was in Fortune, and what was interesting is that it confirmed what I knew in my discussions. I just didn't realize it was quite as large, but Fortune provided a survey to CEOs, and they found CEOs look at this very differently, right? Most of the Fortune 500 CEOs have been taking our work for years on AI systems in the enterprise. So it really wasn't surprising, but it was nicely confirming that. And the survey asked, in terms of your view on the potential as opportunities for your business over the next 10 years, 58% of the CEOs ranked predictive AI the highest, whereas generative AI was ranked highest by only 12%, right? So that's good news, because the CEOs are a lot more educated about AI than we thought, right? Or most people thought. We like to think one of the reasons for that is because they've been reading our work for all these years, but we're not the only ones. And I do indeed know that quite a few of them have spent enormous amount of time. It's a steep learning curve, and some of them have become quite expert at this. Not everybody, but quite a few. It's impressive, the learning curve. So that was confirming to us, but it also gives you a pretty dramatic view of the different way CEOs are looking at this and the needs of governance versus even their own employees, perhaps even some of their middle management that may not be aware that, especially if they're outside these organizations. A lot of organizations are still trying to get their arms around how do we deal with this generative AI? What's the best way to move forward? And so that gives you a pretty good indication of how the CEOs and at least the Fortune 500 feel about it. So pre-optimized precision data management for AI systems, absolutely critical. And it requires a modest investment to be able to do the KOS in the enterprise. But again, it's competitive with other enterprise software. So it's not a very large expense, all things considered, especially when you compare it to the governance and the ROI that's expected from it. To end, we believe that the experience of the the chatbots, the consumer chatbots, and all the risks and all the problems with it, it demonstrated, essentially reconfirms the need and the value of our KOS. And so that is why we did it. And we, in discussions with a lot of organizations and senior management, they wanted a way to use generative AI. And so that's why we designed a way in our KOS to be able to integrate generative AI safely into our KOS. I'll just leave you with that. If you're an organization in let's say a mid-size enterprise, and you don't license a lot of third-party data and train on that data, it's going to take longer to be able to do the same functions that you can do in the consumer bots, right? Because you're not using billions of parameters in the LLMs. It's going to take longer. However, what you do develop and what you can use, letters and reports and that sort of thing, it's going to be quality data. It's going to be accurate, and it's going to be based on your own work. So we again, I recommend a combination of internal high quality data. Our data and our KOS generates its own data through the natural workflow of the organization and the humans, people using it, and then licensed data, and then also applied synthetic data to essentially turbo boost your generative AI. So I'll leave it there, and as you can see here, some of the references that I have in the paper. If you're interested in getting a copy of the paper, you can email me or contact me through LinkedIn. My email address is markm@KYield.com, KYield.com. Thanks. Have a great day.